Okay, we're about to get started, just waiting for our live stream to connect. There we are. All right. Welcome everyone to this special Monday edition of the Bureau. Normally we're closed on Mondays, but when Sarah says she's available, we say yes. Always. My name is Greg Newton. I'm the co-founder, along with my beloved partner, Donnie Jokum, of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. The Bureau is an independent, all-volunteer queer bookstore that Donnie and I founded in 2012, and that's been here at the LGBT Community Center since 2014. As an independent, all-volunteer queer bookstore, we rely on sales and donations to keep the machine going. So I'm going to pass a bag with some change in there if you need it. And there's also a QR code on the back if you'd like to give through Venmo. But generally we say if you're, we encourage you to make a donation, especially if you know you won't be buying a book. But if you're able to support us in multiple ways, we accept your support because we need it. Let's see. Our regular business hours are Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. We often stay open late for events, and we have a lot coming up this week, the final week of June. We're going to make it through. But check out our website, bgsqd.com, and you can see upcoming events. You can also sign up there for our newsletter, which goes out every other Monday, went out today. You can also sign up for that at the back of the room. And let's see, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement before we get started. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. The Bureau also recognizes Palestinian liberation as a fundamental part of our collective queer liberation. And we encourage you to read our free zine. You can grab a copy at the back of the room about why we feel it's especially important for queer people to speak out in solidarity with Palestinians. So please check that out. Thank you. And it is now my pleasure to welcome Sarah Schulman back to the Bureau. I'll just say a couple of brief words. We've always appreciated Sarah's support from before we even had a space to call home. She was on board from the start, and we really appreciate that. And we've had the pleasure of hosting her. The very first time we hosted you was for Israel, Palestine, and the Queer International back in 2012. So welcome back, Sarah. We're happy to have you.
Thank you for the Bureau, my favorite bookstore. I just want to read a little thing on Twitter. And while that's loading, here we are. Former CIA Director John Brennan confirmed on MSNBC today, Iran has no nuclear weapons program. Iran posed no imminent threat to anyone. Iran was nowhere near producing a nuclear warhead. Iran wouldn't even use one in a first strike if it did. Okay, just so we know. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book. I'm going to then talk about the book, and then whatever you guys want to bring up. Your fervent disagreements are welcome. The zone of interest. I'm reading my Twitter, now X, I have two frantic feeds, neither of which knows the other exists. One is a devoted multitude of posts about the Tony Awards of 2024 unfolding on television that evening. Counterposed is an international, devastated, angry, desperate feed about the ongoing shattering of lives and futures in Gaza. These two conversations never seem to meet. I keep checking the posts about the Tony Awards to see if anyone says anything concerning the world or even our own nation. Finally, one winner calls for more arts funding. He says, "It is a requirement for a civilized society." But a few months before the Oscars, it was a little different. The winner in the category of international feature film was The Zone of Interest, a co-production of the UK, Poland, and the United States. Now, on the surface, The Zone of Interest is a Holocaust film about the Nazi commandant of Auschwitz, whose family home, where he raised his children, shared a wall with the extermination camp he oversaw. The film never enters the camp. We see the smoke, we hear some sounds, but the point of view lies strictly with the Nazi family on this side of the wall. On this side of the wall, they have a swimming pool, while the invisible people on the other side have no food. The people on this side have luxury items. They give their children expensive presents. We never see the others, but we know they are being exterminated. Had the Zone of Interest functioned only on the level of this story I just described, it would have been an exquisitely executed retread of information we already know and are in some ways comfortably familiar with. But there is a unique experience to watching this film, that wall. After a while, as we watch, the past and present resonate, and then they begin to merge. But all the transformation takes place inside us, the viewers. The film's narrative stays in the past, but its meaning engulfs the present. That wall becomes the Israeli separation wall, where one side fills swimming pools, while on the other side, Palestinians have no water. One side controls the other while tucking their children into sleep in comfortable beds, and now that side is eliminating the other. The winner, director and writer Jonathan Glazer, then takes this moment of personal recognition and almost trembling, not with happiness, but with fear. He makes the following statement, quote, "All our choices were made to reflect and confront us in the present. Not to say, look what they did then. Rather, look what we do now." Our film shows where dehumanization leads at its worst. It's shaped all of our past and present. Right now, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people. Whether the victims of October the 7th in Israel or the ongoing attack on Gaza, all the victims of this dehumanization, how do we resist? End quote. In many ways, this is a modest statement that the intense violence, murder, and cultural destruction that Jews experienced historically by Nazis produced the violence against Palestinians that Israel is committing today is a well-known interpretation of the cycle of violence, a frequent explanation of the current cataclysm that equates Israeli and Palestinian suffering. Glazer's work had already made this statement. He wasn't coming to the stage like many predecessors, winning for repetitive familiar content, awkwardly squeezing in some unrelated political comment after thanking their agents. But I wondered if the people in the film industry who voted for him fully realized what the film was actually about, how intentional the dual meaning. Of course, he had to be punished for being one of the few public figures to speak the simple truth on American television, the truth that the entertainment and media industries had so studiously avoided that it sounded strange. That was March 10th, 2024. By March 18th, over 1,000 Jewish creatives and professionals signed their names to a public denunciation of Jonathan Glazer. They wrote, quote, "The use of words like occupation to describe an indigenous Jewish people defending a homeland that dates back thousands of years and has been recognized as a state by the United Nations distorts history," end quote. Now, the United Nations does recognize the state of Israel, and it also recognizes that Israel has occupied Palestinian land. To quote from the UN official document, The Question of Palestine, quote, "In the 1967 war, Israel occupied the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem," end quote. I was surprised that so many powerful and intelligent people's first objection was to Glazer stating the globally recognized and simple fact that Israel has militarily occupied land where Palestinians currently live or formerly lived. It is irrefutable that Palestinians' lives are controlled by Israel and they are occupied. I would have expected the signers to justify that occupation, not to claim that it doesn't exist. Equally peculiar is that so many worldly, and in many cases secular people, would use biblical justification for Jewish dominance of land that is inhabited by more than one people. It is certainly true that there have been Arab Jews coexisting with Arab Muslims, Arab Christians, and Druze throughout different empires and collective histories. Jews were an integrated part of the Arab world before the current created false binary of Jews versus Arabs. 40 to 50% of Jews in Israel are of Arab origin, from a range of nations including Iraq, Yemen, Egypt, Morocco, and Palestine. And so Arab Jews were among the range of peoples indigenous to the region, but for over 1,000 people who have significant roles in the corporate creation of American arts and entertainment, to think that Jews are the only indigenous people to that area, or that European Jews are indigenous to the Middle East, simply doesn't make any sense. The letter further stated that these 1,000 Jews believe that Glazer's statement, quote, "gives credence to the modern blood libel that fuels a growing anti-Jewish hatred around the world," end quote. Blood libel is an anti-Semitic claim originating in the Middle Ages, falsely accusing Jews of vampirishly using the blood of Christian children to make Passover matzah. It is pretty crazy that so many people were willing to sign a letter interpreting Glazer's call for an end to using the Holocaust to justify murdering Palestinians as the same as him saying that Jews kill Christian children to make matzah. Medieval Jews, who were a vulnerable and often blamed minority, did not kill Christian children, but the 1,000 signers are betraying an unconscious association because Israelis with American money are killing children daily and in large numbers. I'm sitting in LA across the table from an old friend I love and respect. From a modest Jewish background, she has earned millions of dollars working in corporate television. She is so upset about Israel's violence in Gaza. She is devastated. She looks around to make sure no one in the restaurant can hear her criticize Israel. She won't sign anything. She won't say anything in public. It could hurt her professionally. And this is a common response I've heard from many people. They're afraid to say what they believe to be true because of the 1,000 people who signed their names and the thousands more who didn't sign but feel the same way. My feeling is that, yes, doors will close, but those people do not control everything. Other doors will open. In some strange way, my silent friends believe the myth of the Zionist Jews who control all the entertainment industries. I, on the other hand, do not believe that. Let's face it, if my friends were correct, you would not be reading this book right now, and it wouldn't have been published by Penguin Random House. It takes until April 5th to gather 500 signatures to a new document carefully titled Jewish Creatives Supporting Jonathan Glazer's Oscars Speech. Quote, "We honor the Holocaust by saying never again for anyone. We should be able to name Israel's apartheid and occupation without being accused of rewriting history," end quote. Comparable to its predecessor, this letter includes signers who are composers, actors, writers, producers, showrunners, directors, and members of the Israeli film industry. The names include Deborah Winger, Todd Haynes, Chloe Feynman, Elliot Gould, Joaquin Phoenix, Joel Cohn, James Seamus, Wallace Shawn, Emma Seligman, Lola Kirk, Molly Crabapple, Naomi Klein, Miranda July, Jacqueline Rose, Amy Silman, Lynn Tillman, and many others, and me. Thank you. So let me just introduce the book a little bit and then we can just talk. So the purpose of this book is to make solidarity more doable. And my approach is to strip away all ideas of heroism, perfection, and pure motive. Because these things do not exist, first of all. They're unachievable and they keep people from entering into solidarity, which is actually a process of making mistakes and self-correcting. That's actually what solidarity is. And the idea that you can just jump into a situation and fix it is really a supremacy concept, because we are right now in the middle of a fascist cataclysm and there's no quick fix. So solidarity is actually the building of infrastructure towards the future. So that's the concept. And throughout the book, I use examples from other movements, some of which I think have been grossly under-historicized and should be interesting for you. And I also go to iconoclastic individuals who made very weird contributions to solidarity in their own ways. One example is I look at the French novelist Jean Genet. He was a great friend of Palestine. He wrote a very important book on the massacres at Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. He was recognized and appreciated by Arafat, and he was openly gay through the whole thing. I mean, he probably was the beginning of the queer solidarity movement with Palestine. But when you look into his life history, you find out that, one of his motives was he was really into Arab guys, But it's like, no one's a saint, right? And, if you're looking for this pure, clean motive, it doesn't exist. We all do things for complex reasons. It doesn't matter what your motive is. What matters is what is the outcome of your action. What is the consequence of your action? So just trying to get away from purity. I have been a person who has not been into purity for my whole life, and this is a consequence of that. The other big influence on these ideas is my experiences with ACT UP, and I just want to summarize that a little bit, and then we'll open it up to you guys. So, I was in ACT UP. I was an AIDS reporter for 5 years before ACT UP was founded. Jim Hubbard and I interviewed 188 surviving members of ACT UP over 18 years and created the ACT UP Oral History Project, and I wrote a 600-page book about it. So I do feel like I kind of get what happened. And this is one of the most successful movements of our time in the United States. So it's worth looking at why they were able to be successful. And my main takeaway is that ACT UP worked because it did not function on a consensus model. It had a bottom line. There was a one-line statement of unity, direct action to end the AIDS crisis. But that was it. If you had ideas within that, you were pretty much free to do them. So let's say you had an idea and I thought it was terrible. We would yell and scream at each other because that was ACT UP. But in the end, I wouldn't try to stop you from doing it. I just wouldn't do it. Then I would get my 5 people to do my idea. So what this permitted was a radical democracy structure. Okay, radical democracy means acceptance of difference with a bottom line. This is a structure in which all different kinds of people can respond in different ways, aimed at different milieu, using different aesthetics based on who they are. And that is what creates the paradigm shift. Because movements that try to force everybody into one analysis, or where everyone must agree on one strategy, have all failed historically and globally. That is not a successful strategy for success. Why? Because people are different. And it's so hard to accept, and I've been in therapy for 40 years, trying to accept that people are different, and it's a horrible thing, but they are. So trying to make people be anywhere but where they're at is a fail. So real leadership is something that helps people be effective from where they're at. And that's like the takeaway. So now we're in a time where every single community is under attack. You know, and so this is the time for Big Tent politics, which means accepting that the people that you're connected to are not going to agree with everything that you feel. It's impossible. If you're from Salvador and you don't want to be kidnapped, and you're a Harvard professor and you don't want your students arrested and you don't want your research money taken away, there's a tiny bit of overlap there, but not very much. You know, and you have very different life experiences, but what you have in common is that the forces that are oppressing you are the same. So we have to have a more flexible politic. This is not the time for micro-critique. This is the time to work with people when you agree with them and walk away when you don't. Example, this new pope that everyone's falling over, right? He's anti-gay, he's anti-abortion, but he's incredible on immigrants. And he's been sending his people around now. They're just starting to show up in courtrooms in California and in Chicago and have an impact on, you know, local politics. Because where we are right now, we have to get ICE out of our cities. And if the Catholic Church can help us with that, let's work with them. And then when it gets to abortion, let's walk away. So it's a different way of thinking about things. And that's what I'm trying to offer in this book. And that's what I'm trying to bring. So that's my intro. I don't know if anyone here has had a chance to read it yet, but I am interested in what your thoughts are and what you want to say. So thank you. Yes, hi.
Hi. Small question. Besides, I'm just thinking about like why people go for purity, and kind of like besides people who actually have a social media platform and are worried about being called out for inconsistency or whatever it is. Like, do you think there's just a psychological impact of needing to build like a brand, like an internal, consistent brand and alignment that's been created by kind of like our digital culture, even for those of us that aren't necessarily like famous online?
I think it's different. The question is, why do people want purity?
Yeah.
Well, we are a country that was, the settlers who came here were Puritans. Right? So we have had this moralism ever since white people came here that has been driving the country. So the idea that that would affect everybody is reasonable, but I think people have different personal reasons for going there. And it's mostly because people are afraid to make mistakes. And it's like, when I started getting involved with Palestine, I have made so many mistakes. I make mistakes every day. And I can tell you the first really stupid thing that I did. When I first met Omar Barghouti, who is one of the founders of the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, right? I was so overwhelmed by his vision, which I thought was so right. And I wanted to do the right thing. And I was like, Omar, tell me, what should I do? And he was like, you're creative, you'll think of something. And it's like, it's not his job to make up my strategy. But that was where I was coming from. And I had to learn that if I read and listen and also hear, which is different than listening, I can make up a strategy that makes sense and coheres with what Palestine is telling us that they need. And and that's also a process of making mistakes. So if that's why I'm saying if we get rid of heroism, we're just going to be a lot more effective. Yes?
So full disclosure, I've not read your book, but I plan on doing it now.
Oh, good.
I, as a gay man, like many oppressed groups, right, I had to compromise a large fraction of my life. And so when I finally decided that I was done with that, anything that tries to retake ground for me, I fight hard against. And what you're suggesting pushes up against that very hard. So how would you say to people that are having a hard time, say, accepting the Pope because he's anti-LGBTQ, whatever?
Accepting what?
Accepting the Pope, for example.
Oh, the Pope, yeah.
Right, and what would you be your advice to?
Okay, so this gentleman is concerned about the Pope's anti-gay politics. I didn't say accept the Pope. I said work with him on immigration because he can help us. We're in a sanctuary city, and that means it's illegal for NYPD to cooperate with ICE, but we have a fucking corrupt mayor. And that's why we're in a compromised position, and that's why we need, I mean, even if Mamdani can't do everything that he's promising us, he will stand up to ICE. And that's why we need to, that's why there are some decent people in the Democratic Party, and we need to help them, help us. Does that make you?
Yeah, I have a hard time compromising now.
Well, you don't have to,
Feels
just
like
walk
pop.
away, just walk away. I think this is a time for joining pre-existing organizations. And if there's anything you can tolerate, join it, even if it's the gay volleyball league, okay? I don't know where you're coming from, but, even if it's Jewish Voice for Peace, if it's Working Families Party, if it's your block association. And if you hate everybody, find 2 friends you can meet with once a week and read the newspaper together. Because between COVID and the internet, human relationships have become stagnant. We don't have enough interaction in real life, and that's where we come up with new ideas and visions for the future. Hello.
Sorry.
It's okay. Anybody else? Yes, Lana.
I have a question about the last chapter of your book. I loved all the chapters. The last chapter, for those who haven't, well, you can whatever, is about Bryn Kelly and the political sermon you gave. I could imagine all kinds of reasons why it fits beautifully into the book, but I would love to know, I would love you to talk to connect it more into all the things you've been talking about.
Okay, great, thank you. So the book ends with this. The final chapter is called When Solidarity Fails. It's about an experience that I had where one of my students, a very brilliant trans woman writer named Bryn Kelly, committed suicide. And I was involved with her and her partner and her community. I was there with the body and the police and the whole thing. And then we had a memorial service for her. And it was at St. John the Divine. And her inner circle asked me to give a political eulogy. And I wrote a speech and we all went over it and they made suggestions and everyone agreed on it, and then I gave the talk. Now about 700 people showed up to this. I was coming from this ACT UP political funeral background where we don't pretend that the person died in a non-political context. And so I talked really honestly about all the forces that contributed, the social forces that contributed to Bryn's death. No one in that room had ever been in a room of 600 trans people before. And certainly many people were much younger than me and had not gone through the AIDS crisis and didn't know what a political funeral was, and I had no sensitivity to that at all. I was completely unaware, and I didn't even think about it. So in a way, I made very narcissistic choices. A lot of people were very upset by my speech because what they wanted was something that celebrated Bryn. Many people, the only funerals they had ever been to were like their grandparents. And for them, a funeral was something where you say, the person was so great. And so they were very angry at what I had done. Also, many people assumed that I had gone rogue and just on my own had written the speech. They didn't understand that. And then the third issue was religion. I'm not religious. And a lot of people there felt that Bryn could hear me, that she was watching me, and that what I was saying would hurt her feelings. So there was a huge amount of anger about all of this. So some months later, Morgan and I, the trans woman historian Morgan Page, we held like a listening session in Montreal. It was open to the public, and we explained, because Morgan was one of the people who had organized the event, what it meant to us, how these decisions were made, and then people in the audience responded. And the responses are very unpredictable. So the reason I put this in at the end of the book is that I'm trying to model a process of self-criticism. That you do something, it makes sense to you, a group of people, it makes sense to us. We're not really taking into account where other people are coming from. I don't think I would have not said the things I said, but I think I would have contextualized it completely differently. And that then when there was the anger, we had an opening listening session with the community in person so people could say their feelings. And I lived. I mean, was it fun? No. But it's like you can do it. And so I just felt like I had to give a really concrete example of going through that process. So that's why the book ends there. Yes?
Do you feel like your writing comes from a place of loss? Like that you're writing from a sense of loss a lot, or do you feel like that's not even?
I don't know why it happens the way it happens. I can't explain why I write so much. I don't know why it's in so many forms or why something is in one form. It's all very mysterious to me. And I'm okay with it. I have tried to figure it out and I have no idea. I'm sorry to say. I mean, there's a lot of anger. That definitely is a factor. And trying to make record, which is, I started writing when I was 6. Because my generation was the Diary of Anne Frank generation, and every girl my age had a diary, And I would make record of things that I thought were unjust, and that's still an impulse that I have. But beyond that, it's hard to say. Yeah. Yes?
So I was listening to that interview that David Velasco did with you in Book Forum. It's great. But I felt myself almost reading it like a blueprint for how to do individual one-on-one relationships. And I'm wondering if, like, while shopping this book around and talking about it, if you find that people are often conflating solidarity in this collective social movement process with interpersonal relationships, and basically what the benefits or the downsides are of that.
What's the difference between solidarity and interpersonal relationships? Very little. I mean, I believe that healing takes place in relationship. And I think that that's social as well as personal. I'm very much a product of my time. I'm a Jewish New Yorker born in the middle of the 20th century. I'm very influenced by all the refugee psychoanalysts who came to New York, and that's why every New Yorker is in therapy all your life. And I do believe in the unconscious, and I know that a lot of the people are offended by the idea that they're not in touch with their motives necessarily. So to me, there is this big connection between the intimate and the social. And in my book, Conflict is Not Abuse, I really lay that out. So it starts out in interpersonal relationships, and then I expand and hopefully end coherently with the same dynamics in the geopolitical. So that's where that's coming from. Yes, Matthew.
The passage that you read really, to me, was like the thesis of the book. So for me, when I think everyone has like something they walk away from a book with, what I walked away the most with was that solidarity from each of us requires kind of like a betrayal. Like if you are, like Jonathan Glazer betrayed being part of the Hollywood class in order to stand with Palestine on that stage, and that woman struggling with that betrayal that she wanted to do but couldn't. And I was just wondering, especially with the question that came before about the Pope, if you could talk a little bit about that betrayal that we kind of need to do to practice solidarity.
Thank you. That's Matthew Rodriguez, a great writer. So Matthew asked about the issue of betrayal. I mean, for me to start by saying that betrayal is a huge part of the Jonathan Glazer section, but also how stupid these people are. I mean, how they literally do not know the facts of their own history, and taking it apart piece by piece, you're like, 1,000 people who produce television and movies sign this? But anyway, on the level of your question, solidarity is a risk. And the idea that it's not going to cost you is a false idea. And it can hurt or ruin your relationships with your family and other people. It can help you lose status. You can lose access. You can get fired. Maura Finkelstein, who just lost her tenured job position at Muhlenberg College. You can lose your life, like Rachel Court. But given what's going on in this country right now, if we do nothing, all those things are going to happen anyway. So, that is the reality of it. The idea that you can do it without cost is, I think, a supremacy concept. Any other thoughts? Yes, Ben?
So when I heard the title of your book, two things came to mind, and I'm trying to connect the questions, but the first question is, I heard an interview with Lech Walesa, and he kind of gave a whatever happened to solidarity talk. It was a few years ago, sort of unraveling the years since trade unions worked with the Catholic Church and the Cold War. And there are plenty of problems with that coalition, but it was pretty powerful. The other thing was the incredibly powerful ACT UP funeral last summer, Kathy Otter, where the question I kept on thinking about solidarity, and I think there was a working through that we were going through as we listened to people shared stories about this ACT UP member who passed in complicated ways. So I don't know if there are two questions, but do you see them? I mean, there's sort of there's the intimacy of the working through on the one side, and then there's this big macro question of like whatever happened to that powerful solidarity.
Well, I mean, there is no perfect answer to any of this, and there's no strategy that's going to fix everything. And, you know, the person you're referring to is a trans woman who was the facilitator of ACT UP who committed suicide last year. And, you know, as ACT UP people are getting older and passing away, which is happening with increasing frequency, there's a kind of, we're sort of withering a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we've done a good job in trying to keep a legacy. And you know, it's just about not thinking there's going to be a perfect solution. And if you accept that, you can shift. You know, one of our Lamas and my favorite people on the planet, Vivian Gornick, wrote this incredible book called The Romance of American Communism. And what she discovered is that people in the Communist Party ended up being more loyal to the group than they were to the principles that brought them together. You know, and so you have to know when to walk away and to reimagine and reconfigure. And so it's a process of constant change. And I think if we can accept that, we can go forward. All right, thank you all so much. Thank you.
Plenty of books for sale at the register, and Sarah's going to be signing books back here.
Right there.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, online audience.